This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real events or persons is purely coincidental. This story is purely fictional and does not promote or encourage any form of violence. In the dying twilight of Earth's final days, the sky above every great city burned not with fire, but with a chilling golden light. A silent fleet hovered, casting long shadows across oceans and continents. Humanity's fate teetered between salvation and surrender. Amid this uncertainty, General James Rothwell, a veteran of planetary wars and diplomatic collapses, stood at the heart of the crisis. Not as a soldier, but as a father. This is the story of a final offer from the stars, of secrets wrapped in mercy, and a species on the edge of extinction. In the final days before Earth's destruction, the sky above New York burned with alien light. They came in silence, golden-furred strangers who offered salvation not to all, but to the innocent, Earth's children. For General James Rothwell, this was not diplomacy. It was surrender wrapped in the illusion of mercy. But beneath the surface of this rescue mission lay secrets darker than war, secrets that could doom what remained of humanity. This is the story of one man's suspicion, a world's desperation, and a truth too terrifying to ignore. General James Rothwell sighed. "Yes, Commander Aku. We have met several times. Ah, yes, I recognize your insignia. Humans are so alike." The alien strode importantly across the office, the resilient pads of his broad feet making little plopping sounds on the rug, and seated himself abruptly in the visitor's chair beside General James Rothwell's desk. He gave a sharp cry, and another alien, shorter, but sporting similar golden fur, stepped into the office and closed the door. Both wore simple brown uniforms, without ornamentation. "I am here," Commander Aku said, "to tell you something." He stared impassively at General James Rothwell for a minute, his fur-covered, almost human face completely expressionless. Then his gaze shifted to the window, to the hot runways of New York International Airport, and to the immense gray spaceship that, even from the center of the field, loomed above the hangars and passenger buildings. For an instant, a quick, unguessable emotion clouded the wide black eyes and tightened the thin lips. Then it was gone. General James Rothwell waited. "General, Earth's children must all be aboard my ships within 1 week. We will start to load on the 6th day, next Thursday." He stood. The aliens supervised the loading as anguished parents looked on. General James Rothwell locked eyes with the alien and leaned forward, grinding his knuckles into the desk top. "You know that's impossible. We can't select 100,000 children from every country and assemble them in only 6 days. You will do it." The alien turned to leave. "Commander Aku, let me remind you." Commander Aku spun around, eyes flashing. General James Rothwell, let me remind you that 2 weeks ago I didn't even know Earth existed. And since accidentally happening across your sun system and learning of your trouble, I have had my entire trading fleet of 100 ships in orbit about this planet, while all your multitudinous political subdivisions have filled the air with talk and wrangle. I am sorry for Earth, but my allegiance is to my fleet, and I cannot remain longer than 7 more days and risk being caught up in your destruction. Now, either you accept my offer to evacuate as many humans as my ships will carry, or you don't." He paused. "You are the planet's evacuation coordinator. You will give me an answer." General James Rothwell's arms sagged. He sunk back down into his chair, all pretense gone. Slowly, he swung around to face the window and the gray starship, standing like a gargantuan sundial counting the last days of Earth. He almost whispered, "We are choosing the children. They will be ready in 6 days." He heard the door open and close. He was alone. 5 years ago, he thought, we cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel. And since then, we've built about 3 dozen exploration ships and sent them out among the stars to see what they could see. He stared blankly at the palms of his hand. I wonder what it was we expected to find. We found that the galaxy was big, that there were a lot of stars, not so many planets, and practically no other life, at least no intelligence to compare with ours. Then, he jabbed a button on his intercom. "Ed Phillips here. What is it, Jim?" "Doc, are you sure your boys have hypoed, couched, and hypnoed the Leo crew with everything you've got?" The voice on the intercom sighed. "Jim, those guys haven't got a memory of their own. We know everything about each one of them, from the hurts he got falling off tricycles to the feel of the first girl he kissed. Those men aren't lying, Jim." "I never thought they were lying, Doc." General James Rothwell paused for a minute and studied the long yellow hairs that grew sparsely across the back of his hand, thickened to a dense grove at his wrist, and vanished under the sleeve of his uniform. He looked back at the intercom. "Doc, all I know is that 3 perfectly normal guys got on board that starship, and when it came back we found a lot of jammed instruments and 3 men terrified almost to the point of insanity." "Jim, if you'd seen..." General James Rothwell interrupted. "I know. 5 radioactive planets with the fresh scars of cobalt bombs and the remains of civilizations. Then radar screens erupting crazily with signals from a multi-thousand starship space fleet. Vector computers hurriedly plotting and replotting the fast-moving trajectory, submitting each time an unvarying answer for the fleet's destination, our own solar system." He slapped his hand flat against the desk. "The point is, Doc, it's not much to go on, and we don't dare send another starship to check for fear of attracting attention to ourselves. If we could only be sure." "Jim?" Over the intercom, Philip's voice seemed to waver slightly. "Those men honestly saw what they say. I'd stake my life on it." "All of us are, Doc." He flipped the off button. Just 30 days now, since the scout starship Leo's discovery and the panicked dash for home with the warning. Not that the warning was worth much, he reflected. Earth had no space battle fleet. There had never been any reason to build one. Then, 2 weeks ago, Commander Aku's trading fleet had descended from nowhere. Having blundered, he said, across Earth's orbit, while on a new route between 2 distant star clusters. When told of the impending attack, Commander Aku immediately offered to cancel his trip and evacuate as many humans as his ships could hold, so that humanity would at least survive somewhere in the galaxy. Earth chose to accept his offer. "Hobson's choice," General James Rothwell growled to himself. "No choice at all." After years of handling hot and cold local wars and crises of every description, his military mind had become conditioned to a complete disbelief in fortuitous coincidence, and he gagged at the thought of Commander Aku just happening by. Still frowning, he punched a yellow button on his desk and reviewed in his mind the things he wanted to say. "Jim, isn't everything all right?" Chagrined, General James Rothwell scrambled to his feet. The president had never answered so quickly before. He faced the screen on the wall to his right and saluted, amazed once again at how old the man looked. Sparse white hair crisscrossed haphazardly over the president's head. His face was lined with deep trenches that not even the most charitable could call wrinkles, and the faded eyes that stared from deep caverns no longer radiated the flaming vitality that had inspired victorious armies in the African War. "Commander Aku was just here, sir. He demands that the children be ready for evacuation next Thursday. I told him that it would be damned difficult. The face on the screen paled perceptibly. I hope you didn't anger the commander. General James Rothwell ground his teeth. I told him we'd deliver the goods on Thursday. Presidential lips tightened. I don't care for the way you said that, General. General James Rothwell straightened. I apologize, sir. It's just that this whole lousy setup has me worried silly. I don't like Commander Aku making like a guardian angel, and us having no choice but to dance to his harp. His fingers clenched. God knows we need his help, and I guess it's wrong to ask too many questions. But how come he's only landed one of his ships? And why is it that he and his lieutenant are the only aliens to leave that starship? The only aliens we've ever even seen. It just doesn't figure out. There, he thought. I've said it. The president looked at him quietly for a minute, then answered softly, I know, Jim, but what else can we do? General James Rothwell winced at the shake in the old man's voice. I don't know, he said, but Commander Aku's got us in a hell of a spot. Jim, you haven't said this in public, have you? General James Rothwell snorted. No, sir, I don't care for a panic. There, Jim. The president smiled weakly. We can't expect the aliens to act like we do, can we? He began to adopt the preacher tone he used so effectively in his campaign speeches. We must be thankful for the chance breeze that wafted Commander Aku to these shores, and for his help. Maybe the war fleet won't arrive after all, and everything will turn out all right. You're doing a fine job, Jim. The screen went blank. General James Rothwell felt sick. He felt sorry for the president, but sorrier for the Western Democratic Union to be captained by such a feeble thing. Leaning back in his chair, he glared at the empty screen. You can't solve problems by wishing them away. You knew that once. His mind wandered, and for a minute he thought he could actually feel the growing pressure of 3 billion people waiting for the computers of Moscow Central to make their impartial choice from the world's children. Trained mathematicians, the best that could be mustered from every major country, monitored each phase of the project to ensure its absolute honesty. 100,000 children were to be picked completely at random. Brown, yellow, black, white, red, sick or well, genius or moron. Every child had an equal chance. This fact alone gave every parent hope, and possibly prevented worldwide rioting. But with the destruction of the planet, an almost certainty, the collective nervous system was just 1 micron away from explosion. There was nothing else to think about or talk about, and no one tried to pretend any different. General James Rothwell's eyes moved involuntarily to the little spherical tri-photo on his desk. Just an informal shot he'd snapped a few months back of Martha and her proudest possessions, their rambunctious, priceless offspring, Jim Jr., in his Space Scout's uniform, and Mary Ellen with that crazy hairdo she was so proud of then, but had already forgotten. Damn, he said aloud. Damn it to hell. In one quick movement, he spun his chair around and jabbed at the intercom. Get the aerial transport. His voice crackled. Grabbing his hat, he yanked open the door and strode into the sudden quiet of the small office. He turned right and went out through a side entrance to a small landing ramp, arriving just as his personal aerial transport touched down. He climbed in. To the starship. As he settled back in the hard seat, General James Rothwell offered a silent thanks that instead of asking which starship, Sergeant Johnson promptly lifted and headed for the gray space vessel that dominated the field. A few hundred yards from the craft, he said, You'd better set her down here, Sarge, and let me walk in. Our friends might get nervous about something flying in at them. He jumped out, squinting against the hot glare off the concrete, and then with a slight uneasiness, stepped into the dark shadow that pointed 1,000 feet along the runway, away from the setting sun. He walked towards the starship. A few seconds later, his eye caught a small, unexplained flash, and he threw himself flat, just as a section of pavement exploded, 12 feet ahead. Cursing, General James Rothwell picked himself off the ground, brushed the dust off his uniform, and stood quietly. He didn't have long to wait. A small cubicle jutted out from the starship and lowered itself along a monorail running down to the ground. The side nearest him opened, revealing, as General James Rothwell expected, Commander Aku and his lieutenant, who both hurried over to where he was standing, as if to keep him from coming forward to meet them, and in so doing, coming nearer the starship. As the commander trotted rapidly towards him, General James Rothwell noted that he was still buttoning his jacket, and that the shirt underneath looked suspiciously as if it hadn't been buttoned at all. Funny, he thought, that my presence should cause such a panic. General, what a pleasure. The commander's disconcerted look belied his words, but even as he spoke, he began to regain his composure and assume the poker face that General James Rothwell had come to expect. I do hope, said General James Rothwell, that my visit hasn't inconvenienced you. Commander Aku and his lieutenant traded swift glances. Neither said anything. Well, General James Rothwell began again. I am here to convey to you the good wishes of the President of our country and to submit a request from him and from the other governments of the earth. Commander Aku straightened. Though merely the commander of a poor trading fleet, I feel sure I speak for my empire when I wish your president good health. The request. General James Rothwell spoke evenly, trying to keep the bitterness out of his voice. Commander, when the attack comes, we expect that Earth with all its life will be annihilated, but your offer to transport 100,000 children to your own home worlds has prevented despair and has at least given us hope that if we will not see the future, our children will. Commander Aku nodded slightly, avoiding his eyes. You take it well. But it takes more than hope, Commander. We need some assurance also that our children will be all right. He took an involuntary step nearer the alien, whose facial muscles never moved, and who turned away slightly, refusing to meet General James Rothwell's eyes. Commander, you and your lieutenant are the only members of your race that we have ever seen, and then only on official business. We would like very much to meet the others. Why don't you land your ships and give the crews liberty so that we can meet them informally, and they can get to know us also. That way it won't seem as if we are giving our kids over to complete strangers. Without turning his head, Commander Aku said flatly, That is impossible. Do you want reasons? No, General James Rothwell said quietly. If you don't want to do something, it's easy enough to think up reasons. He ached to reach out and grab the alien neck, to shake some expression into that frozen face. Look, Commander, surely the friendship of a doomed race can't bring any harm to your crew. Commander Aku faced him now. What you ask is impossible. Ashamed of the desperate note that crept inadvertently into his voice, General James Rothwell said, Commander, will you let me, alone, briefly enter your starship so that I can tell my people what it is like? Commander Aku and the lieutenant traded a long, silent look. Then the lieutenant almost imperceptibly shrugged his shoulders. Without moving, turned partly away from General James Rothwell. Commander Aku said, simply, No. The two started to walk back to the starship. Commander. They stopped, but didn't turn. Commander Aku, if you have any sort of god in your empire, or any sort of honor that your race swears by, please tell me one thing. Tell me that our children will be safe. I won't ask you anything else." The two aliens stood still, facing away from him, towards their starship. Minutes passed. General James Rothwell stood quietly, looking at their backs, human appearing, but hiding unguessable thoughts. Neither of them moved or said a word. Finally, he turned and walked away, back towards his aerial transport. He leaned back in the little aerial transport's bucket seat and ran a large hand through unruly yellow hair that was already flecked with white. The first evening lights of Brooklyn and Queens, and off to the left, Manhattan, moved unseen beneath him as the craft headed towards his home. Damn it, he thought. Is it that Commander Aku just doesn't care what we think, or that he cares very much what we would think if we knew whatever it is he's hiding? He banged his fists together in frustration. How the hell can anyone guess what goes on in an alien mind? His whole damn brain is probably completely different. Maybe to him a poker face is friendly. Maybe he's honestly not hiding anything at all. He looked out as the aerial transport slowly started its descent. No evidence, he thought. Not a shred, except a suspicious mind, and he glanced at the dirt on his trousers and a shell exploding in my face. He slapped his hat back on and whirled to the surprised pilot. Damn it, I don't make the decisions. I'm just in charge of loading, and if the president says it's okay, then it's okay with me. He stepped out onto the grass of his yard and quashed a little shriek of conscience somewhere in the back of his mind. Blinding lights pinned him in mid-stride. A familiar voice sprang out of the glare. Here he is now, viewers, General James Rothwell, Commander of the Western Armies and head of the Earth Evacuation Project. General, international TV cameras have been waiting secretly in your yard for hours for your return. As his eyes adjusted, General James Rothwell distinguished a camera crew, their small portable instrument, and a young, smooth-talking announcer that he had seen several times on television. He forced the annoyance out of his eyes. This, he thought, is all I need. What the general doesn't know, the announcer went on, is that earlier this evening it was announced by Moscow Central that the computers had picked his son as one of the evacuees. The shock was visible on 150,000 TV sets. Completely unexpected, the surprise of the announcement hit General James Rothwell like a physical blow. His eyes widened, his chin dropped, and for an instant the world's viewers read in his face the frank emotions of a father, unshielded by military veneer. Then years of training took command, and he faced the camera, apparently calm, though churning internally. The odds, he thought confusedly, the odds must be at least 10,000 to 1. Then he realized that someone was talking to him, waving a microphone. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch," he mumbled at the camera. The announcer laughed amiably. "Certainly can't blame you. This must be a really big night. How does it feel, General, for your son to be one of the evacuees?" Something in the back of his mind twisted the question. How does it feel, General, to turn your only son over to a poker-faced alien who shoots when you walk near his starship? "I'm not sure," he said, "how I feel." Talking excitedly, the announcer drew closer. "To think that your name will live forever in the vast star clusters of the galaxy." He lowered his voice. "General, speaking now unofficially, as a parent, to the thousands of other parents whose children may also be selected, and to the rest of us who—" He seemed to stumble for a word, and for an instant General James Rothwell saw him too, as a man worried and afraid, instead of as part of a television machine. "Well, General, you've had contact with the aliens. Are you glad your son is going?" General James Rothwell looked at the strained face of the announcer, at the camera crew quietly eyeing him, and at the small, huddled group of neighbors hovering in the background. And he knew that his next words might be the most critical he would ever use in his life. In a world strained emotionally almost beyond endurance, the wrong words, a hint of a suspicion, could spark the riots that would kill millions and bring total destruction. He faced the camera and said calmly, "I am glad my son is going. I wish it could happen for everyone. Commander Aku has assured me that everything will turn out all right." Mentally, he begged for forgiveness. There was nothing else he could say. Sweat glistened on his forehead as he tried to fight down the memory of Commander Aku, turning his back on the plea that echoed in his brain. "Tell me that our children will be safe." The front door of the house banged open, and all at once Martha was in his arms, crying, laughing. "Oh, Jim, I'm so glad. So very glad." General James Rothwell blinked his eyes as he put his arm around her and waved the camera away. Tears sparkled on his cheeks, but neither Martha nor the viewers knew why. The next morning, Commander Aku and his ever-present lieutenant were waiting when General James Rothwell's aerial transport set him down in front of the administration building a few minutes later than usual. They followed him into his office. "Coffee?" General James Rothwell held out a paper cup. "No, thank you," said Commander Aku, as expressionless as ever. "We are here to make final arrangements for the evacuation." "I see. Well," said General James Rothwell, "Thursday will be a very painful day for us, and we will want to expedite things as much as possible." Commander Aku nodded. General James Rothwell went on. "I have made arrangements to have 100 airfields cleared at various population centers around the world. That way your ships can land simultaneously, one at each field, and the loading can be finished in very little time. Now," he opened a desk drawer. "Here is a list of..." Commander Aku held up a fur-covered hand. "That will not be possible." General James Rothwell looked down at his desk and closed his eyes briefly. "I knew it," he thought. "I knew this would happen, sure as hell." He raised his head. "Impossible. We will first land 20 ships. These 20 must be fully loaded and back in orbit before the next will land. We will use the first 20 airfields on your list." General James Rothwell took a deep breath. "But I thought you wanted to get away as soon as possible. It will take at least an extra day to load according to your scheme." "Will it?" Commander Aku moved to go. His lieutenant reached to open the door. On an impulse, General James Rothwell stepped forward. "Commander, if you had a son, would you send him away like this?" Commander Aku stopped and looked directly at him with even, black eyes. Then the gaze moved through and past him, to the window and the starship beyond. For a minute his expression altered, changing almost to one of pain. When he spoke, it was almost to himself. "My father loved his children more than..." He started as his lieutenant suddenly clapped a hand on his shoulder. The expression vanished. They left together, without looking at General James Rothwell or saying another word. For several minutes, General James Rothwell stared frowning at the closed door. He walked thoughtfully back to his desk and lowered himself slowly into the chair. He sat for a long time, trying to puzzle through the picture. Finally, he stood and paced the room. "Suppose," he said to himself, "just suppose that not all of those 100 ships up there are really cargo ships. Suppose that, say, only 20 are. Then after those 20 were loaded..." He swung around to look again at the long, slim silhouette poised high against the main runway. With ocean vessels, it's the fighting ships that are lean and slender. Bending over his desk, he nudged an intercom button with his finger. "Doc, how would one go about trying to understand an alien's reactions?" Phillips's voice shot right back. "Well, Jim, the very first thing, you'd have to be sure they weren't exactly the same as a human's reactions." General James Rothwell paused, startled. "It can't be, Doc. Why, if Commander Aku was a human, I'd say..." He stiffened, feeling the hair rise at the back of his neck. The short, curt answers, the refusal to meet his eyes, the frozen expression clicked into pattern. Doc. I'd say he was being forced to do something he hated like hell to do. Tensely, he straightened and contemplated the lean gray spaceship. Then he whirled around and slapped every button on the intercom. Thursday. The sun pecked fitfully at the low overcast, while a sullen crowd watched a squat alien starship descend vertically to finally settle with a flaming belch not far from the first. Similar crowds watched similar landings at 19 other airports around the world, but the loading was to start first in New York. An elevator-like box swung out from the fat belly of the starship and was lowered rapidly to the ground. Two golden-hued aliens, in uniforms resembling Commander Aku's, stepped out and walked about 1,000 feet towards the crowd. Only children actually being loaded were to go beyond this point. Parents had to stay at the airport gates. "When do I go, Dad?" "Shortly, son." General James Rothwell laid his hand on the lean shoulder. "You're in the second 100. There was a brief, awkward silence. "Martha, you'd better take him over to the line." He held out his hand. "So long, son." Jim Jr. shook his hand gravely, then, without a word, suddenly threw his hands tight around his younger sister. He took his mother's hand, and they walked slowly over to the sad line that was forming beyond the gate. General James Rothwell turned to his daughter. "You going over there too, kitten?" The words were gruff in his tight throat. She wiped a hand quickly across her cheek. "No, Dad. I guess I'll stay here with you." She stood close beside him. Commander Aku, forgotten until now, cleared his throat. "I think the loading should start, General." Raising his hand in a half-salute, General James Rothwell signaled to a captain standing near the gate, who turned and motioned to a small cordon of military police. Shortly, a group of 50 of the first youngsters in the line separated from the others and moved slowly out onto the concrete ribbon towards the waiting starship. The rest of the line hesitated, then edged reluctantly up to the gate to take the place of the 50 who had left. They waited there, the children of 1,000 families, suddenly dead quiet, staring after the 50 that slowly moved away. They walked quietly, in a tight group, without any antics or horseplay, which in itself gave the event an air of unreality. Approaching the starship, they seemed to huddle even closer together, forming a pathetically tiny cluster in the shadow of the towering space cruiser. The title of a book that he had read once, many years before, flashed unexpectedly in General James Rothwell's memory. The Story of Mankind. He looked sadly after the 50, then back at the silent line. Were these frightened kids now writing the final period in the last chapter? He shook himself. Work to be done. No time now for daydreams. As the 50 reached the starship and started to enter the elevator, General James Rothwell turned and beckoned to some technicians standing out of sight, just inside the entrance to the control tower. 3 of them ran out and set up what looked like a television set, only with 3 screens. One ran back, unreeling a power cable, while a 4th flicked on a bank of switches, making feverish, minute adjustments. General James Rothwell felt the sweat in his hands. "Is it okay, Sergeant?" The back of the sergeant's shirt was wet, though the air was cool. "It's got to be, sir." His fingers played across the knobs. "All that metal, the whole thing is critical as..." "Ah!" He jumped back. The screens flashed into life. Commander Aku stiffened. His lieutenant gasped audibly, made a jerky movement towards the screens, then suddenly became aware of 3 MPs standing beside him, hands nonchalantly cradling blunt-nosed weapons. All 3 receivers showed similar scenes: the milling youngsters and the starship. But from up close, the pictures jerking and swaying erratically as if the cameras were somehow fastened to moving human beings. Then the scenes condensed into a cramped, jostling blackness as the 50 crowded into the elevator and were lifted up the side of the starship. Next were 3 views of a large room, bare except for what appeared to be overhead cranes and other mechanical paraphernalia of a military shop or warehouse. For a while, the 50 moved about restlessly, then the cameras swung about simultaneously to face a wall that slowly slid apart. General James Rothwell froze. Good Lord! 6 murky things moved from the open wall towards the cameras, which fell back to the opposite side of the room. Each was large, many times the size of a man, but somehow indistinct, for the cameras didn't convey any sense of shape or form. For an instant, one of the screens flashed a picture of a terrified human face and arms raised protectively as the shadowy things moved in upon the group. A projection snapped out from one, grabbed 2 of the humans, and hurled them into a corner. Then it motioned a dozen or so others over to the same spot. With similar harsh, sweeping movements, the group of humans was quickly broken up into 3 roughly equal segments. One of the groups seemed to be protecting someone who appeared seriously hurt. A black tentacle lashed out, and one of the screens went blank. Then another. The third showed a small group pushed stumbling through a narrow door, down as the skies cleared, and the last embers of alien steel faded into Earth's horizon. General James Rothwell stood among the ashes, breathing not just relief, but resolve. The world had come within a whisper of sacrificing its future, lulled by the soft words of something almost human. Now, the children were safe, the traitors unmasked, and the spirit of defiance had proven stronger than fear. Humanity would not forget. It would rebuild not only its cities, but its trust, its courage, and its will to protect. Beneath the same stars that once threatened its end, Earth began again the end.